Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Snehesh Philip. As you can see, this is a new program here at The Print. This is actually a brand new format that we are doing here at The Print, and this show is called The Print's Quick Analysis and Opinion. What we plan to do is that whenever there's a interesting development that takes place on the in the news arena, we will have our reporters, that is me, my colleagues, anyone else, would come out and do their quick analysis or their opinion on a developing story, which should last about 5 to 10 minutes. So the reason why I'm here, along with my colleague Keshav Padmanabhan, is because interesting developments are taking place in the Russia-Ukraine war. So Keshav, you are someone who closely tracks these global developments. What is happening? What's the latest in Russia?
So it began on Sunday when the long-standing defense minister Sergei Shoigu, who's been the defense minister of Russia since 2012, was replaced. In his place, they brought in Andrey Belousov, who was the first deputy prime minister and an economist. And this is a huge change because Mr. Shoigu has been the face of the Russian army since its war began in Ukraine in February 2022. And there are various reasons for this, but this is the major change that's happening internally in Russia right now.
You mentioned that there are various reasons for it. The defense minister was someone who was always seen alongside Putin, right? And you've seen those videos that have emerged of Putin sitting on this long table and chatting with him. But what happened? Why was he sacked, removed? What really happened?
So see, he was accommodated with a position as the Secretary of the Security Council.
So which means that he's still there.
He's not still there.
Completely out, but he's been downgraded.
He's been given a post equivalent to, say, a national security advisor, but it has no real power when it comes to the Russian military or Russian politics. So he's been accommodated, and Mr. Belousov has now...
I love the word that he used, accommodated.
Yes, so that's how it's worked so far. So Mr. Shoigu now has a post with no power, while Mr. Belousov, an economist, is in control of Russia's sprawling military sector, given that last year their budget said that they're allocating close to $115 billion, which is a third of their annual budget towards the military. So you see this change that Putin's brought, and the Kremlin said it's to be open to innovation. That's what Peskov said.
That's there, but why was he sacked? All of a sudden, why was he...
So this was brought
because prior to his sacking, his deputy was also removed.
Yes.
His deputy was actually sacked.
Yes, arrested actually.
Arrested and not
corruption charges. Yes, corruption charges. Mr. Timur Ivanov. Similarly, yesterday, Lieutenant General Yuri Kuznetsov was also arrested and detained for accepting bribes. So there is this sense that there is a clamping down on corruption in the military, because as its budget has grown, so has corruption. And it seems like President Putin is in a comfortable position right now, especially with regards to the war in Ukraine, to make these sort of moves early on in his fifth term, which he just began a couple of weeks ago.
Viewers, remember that this is very interesting. It's not just that that Putin finds himself comfortable because of in the conflict with Ukraine, but he also feels comfortable enough to actually remove the chief and not face any kind of rebellion. And as I was mentioning earlier, the first step that he did was sack the deputy chief, that is the defense minister's deputy. And he was sacked because he was someone who was in charge of capital budget, in charge of constructions.
Military construction.
So there it was alleged that he had done, he was corrupt, he was removed. And then Shoigu was removed. And as Keshav said, another high-ranking officer was also being removed. So while this is on, what's really happening at the Ukraine front?
Right, and that's the interesting thing, which actually I wanted to ask you, right? What is happening? Because we had the US recently announce a $61 billion aid to Ukraine. So what really is happening there right now that makes Putin feel so comfortable?
And I was so hopeful that he will answer. I was asking the question, and he gave a counter question to me when he threw the ball back in my court. Well, what's really happening on the Ukraine front is that while the Americans have really gone ahead and given out a doled out a big numbers, it's a different thing that none of that single dollar is going to Ukraine directly. Those billions of dollars will actually go to American companies who will supply the equipment to Ukraine. So remember, none of those, not even a single dollar, is actually going to Ukraine. Now, in the meantime, what has happened is that because there has been such a flux, the Western world, especially the US and others, have not been able to supply Ukraine with the equipment that they so desperately need, which meant that the fighting capability of the Ukrainians have come down. Now, another problem with the Ukrainians, besides of course the equipment, is the fact that the Ukrainians really don't have people to fight. And it's not that tomorrow, if somebody goes, for example, if India goes to war and suddenly they say Keshav and Snehesh come and fight in the front, we are not capable of it because we need training. But in Ukraine, the problem is that there is no time for imparting those trainings, and there are no required personnel in large numbers to ensure that this training happens quickly, swiftly, in whatever way. So now what has happened is that while Russia did, of course, have started off thinking that it's going to be a blitzkrieg attack, but it's been 2 years. The Russians have not managed to get anywhere close to their objective. But what the Russians have now done, because of this time gap, the Russians have managed to go ahead and replace all the losses of equipment that it had in the initial stages of war. But the Russians, if you go back to history, it's always come across that the Russians start off the war on a wrong foot. That's what history tells us. But eventually, as the war goes on, is when the Russians starts learning what went wrong. And so this is exactly what is happening here in the Russia-Ukraine conflict also, is that the Russians have now gone ahead and launched a mega operation again, to reclaim the city of Kharkiv. Now remember that this was a city that the Ukrainians pushed the Russians out of in 2022. It was a splendid operation, but now suddenly, because of this large movement of men and equipment, the already thinned out Ukrainian forces have been forced to move their personnel to Kharkiv. Now, interesting is also the fact that when I'm sorry, this is coming across more like a monologue, but the interesting fact is also the point that the Russians have now understood the game of technology. Now, the Russians are superior than Ukrainians, of course, when it comes to the technology aspect, and now they have brought in more technology into the conflict, and this is also changing the dynamics on the ground. But then, it all depends till the Western supply starts coming back in. This should be somewhere in July, August onwards is when the Russians, when the Western supplies start coming in. But if the Russians can manage to pull off what they want to do till then, it's going to be a Russian, not a win per se, but it's going to be a Russian victory. Do you agree with that?
The momentum is definitely with Russia right now, and like you pointed out rightly, Ukraine is outgunned, outmanned, and economically also the materials they have cannot compete with Russia. And there is this window of opportunity which they seem to be exploiting, especially near Kharkiv, where there have been about 6,000 Ukrainians fleeing their homes over the weekend. And also, it should be noted that Belousov was one of the architects of the Russian economy and the technology, especially that drone program, when he was first deputy prime minister. And now he's heading the Ministry of Defense. So you can see the kind of person that Putin has put in is someone that you mentioned, how Russia is learning technologically. Belousov was one of the architects of that since the war started in 2022. So there are these changes. There is momentum clearly in Russia's favor right now. But the question, like you said, would it be an outright win, or is it just still Ukraine can stabilize? And when would they stabilize the front line? So there are multiple questions, but
Well, the answers to which lies ahead in future, we won't be able to answer that. But this is something that we are keenly following. While of course, amid all the developments that are happening across the world, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is something which has seen a slight dip as far as interest or news reports are concerned. But here at the print, we tend to keep a track of all developments that are happening across the world, news that you would have missed. And Keshav will tell us about this new feature that we here at the print have launched, a weekly feature which comes every Saturday. This is right now in a text format, but we'll soon have it on video too, which is what?
the roundup, the global roundup that we've been publishing now for over a month. I think we've done about
Yeah.
5 or 6 stories about this, where we cover news you may have missed otherwise from across the globe.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much here for logging on to the Print's YouTube channel and watching us. Please do subscribe to the Print and follow the Print as we bring you stories not just from India, not just from the polling states, but around the world.